Welcome back to Schlyde into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schlyde, aka Schlyde, and here we normally talk about the trickle-down effect of rules and regulations in college sports, as well as other relevant sports outcomes, whether it be college sports related or professional sports related. This summer, we've been focusing a lot on the World Cup, and we've kind of been focusing on other relevant stories as well that are connected to other future events. This week, we've got the World Cup, per usual. We've got the semifinals, which start right now. They're actually starting right now as I'm broadcasting out to you guys. And then just want to talk a little bit about the semifinal matches, previewing them. Some of you guys are going to get an immediate preview, I guess, depending on if you're listening on Tuesday versus if you're listening on Friday. Also going to talk about tomorrow's semifinal match, kind of recap a little bit of what else has happened in the World Cup, because there's been a couple of interesting outcomes that we have to talk about. Erling Haaland, he may not have left America with the World Cup trophy, but he did leave with a very interesting souvenir that we are going to talk about. The IOC moved to end Russia's suspension in international sports, so we are going to see Russia in the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, so we are going to be talking about that. And finally, a controversial story with EA Sports College Football 2027, or CFB 27, the video game, which is a primary source of revenue for college athletes, or one of the many sources of revenue for college athletes, because they do get paid to be a part of the game. And essentially what happened was there was some microtransactions in certain game modes that were not there in CFB 2026. So with that being said, let's jump right into this. We're going to start off with the IOC moving to end Russia neutrality for the 2028 Olympics. So essentially what that means is in the previous Olympics for the winter, and I believe also last summer as well, Russia had a suspension that was placed upon them due to them being the aggressor in the Ukraine war. So as punishment or incentive for Russia to end the war in Ukraine, the IOC said, okay, we're going to place a suspension on you. But now, as tensions are starting to fluctuate still, as the war is hopefully starting to come to an end, the IOC has lifted the suspension on Russia. The move was expected since the International Olympic Committee advised 2 months ago that athletes from Belarus, which is Russia's military ally in the full military invasion of Ukraine, should be allowed to again compete with their full national identity. The IOC stands in solidarity with the Olympic community of Ukraine, which the Olympic movement has supported since the beginning of the war and will continue to do so, which is what the Olympic body said in a statement after a meeting of its executive board. This quote was pulled from ESPN. The IOC eased entry requirements to its own events for Russian athletes and teams while provisionally lifting its suspension since October 2023. So it's been a 3-year suspension so far. The Russian Olympic Committee. The terms of that suspension, imposed when the Russian Olympic body incorporated regional sports councils from occupied regions of Ukraine, no longer applied, according to the IOC. Just 32 approved athletes from Russia and Belarus competed at the 2024 Paris Olympics under neutral status. So, for those of you that don't know, that essentially just means that they competed with the flag of the Olympics with the 5 rings. It's a white flag with the 5 Olympic rings. Didn't really realize that until that suspension actually happened, because I was like, wait a second, these people used to have Russian flags next to their names, but now there's nothing. And that's how I learned why. So in the 2028 Olympics, these athletes were going to see not have a neutral flag next to their names when they're competing on either the track and field or the swimming pool or wherever they're competing in the Summer Olympics. The Russian team had more than 300 athletes at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics and won 71 medals. So it's going to be very interesting to see how many Russian athletes compete at the Olympics in 2 years. We're already 2 years out, almost exactly 2 years out, because Olympics does start in July and kind of ends in August. At least the Summer Olympics do. But, jumping from 32 in 2024 to 300 in 2021, or I guess, other way around, but you know what I mean? Like the amount of athletes, that's a huge difference. I mean, 32 compared to 300, very big difference. IOC did not yet approve letting Russian athletes and teams compete with their flag and anthem. So we still don't know if we're going to see them compete with the Russian flag and anthem, but based on what the article is saying, with the suspension being lifted in the 2028 Olympics, we are going to see more Russian athletes. It's just a matter of, are they going to be competing for the country of Russia, or are they just going to be competing as neutral athletes? The next Olympic competition is the 2026 Youth Summer Games at Dakar, Senegal, which opens October 31st. The IOC said to address the lack of confidence in the global sporting community relating to the return of Russian athletes to international competition. Those athletes must give multiple doping controls and be part of a recognized testing program. Russia has gotten in trouble in the past with doping or getting caught doping. IOC said it will continue to not organize IOC events in Russia or invite Russian government or state officials to its events. So if Russia competes, probably not going to see Putin there. Probably not going to see any other people from Putin's cabinet or whatever, however their government works. I don't know if it's a cabinet or if it's a Congress or whatever their governing body is. Probably not going to see any of those people at the 2028 USA Olympics. But yeah, I just thought that was a pretty interesting story to kind of come out, I guess, just because, obviously the war in Ukraine is still going on, and that was one of the factors that led to Russia being suspended. But also considering the facts that it is in the United States, and the United States is on the side of Ukraine in the war of Ukraine, that could bring some interesting storylines heading into the 2028 Olympics, especially if Russia is allowed to compete under their flag and play their national anthem. I think it'll brew up some pretty compelling stories, some rivalries. We'll most likely see some political stories. I mean, even with the World Cup, we've seen political stories. You look at the whole situation with Iran, with their team having to go back and forth from Mexico and the United States to compete in this year's World Cup. And the questions that they were being asked were primarily surrounding the situation with their home country going against the United States in a war. And the players did not really like that too much. To be fair, I would not have liked it either. And also, I'm not a huge fan of those questions. Just in general. I mean, we see it all the time with the Olympics. We saw it with the Winter Olympics. American athletes being questioned about if they're happy about, the decisions that are being made in their home country. And it's like, why can't we just focus on the performance that the athlete has put on for us, whether it's a gold, silver, or bronze medal performance, bringing home the hardware to their respective country. Like just focusing on what the athlete did in their competition. If the athlete does do something controversial, like, I mean, you look at Jesse Jackson, like he raised his fist with the black glove, and so did other African American athletes in track and field. So I think that justifies questioning, because some people might not know what that means. But if you're just asking questions just to make the person angry or get a reaction out of them just for an article or a quick article, then to me, it just lacks integrity. So that's just kind of my opinion on all of that. But I do think Russia kind of making their way back into the Olympics should be quite interesting, with swimming especially, because there are some pretty quick swimmers in Russia. Some of them are right on top of world records. Some of them, I believe, have them. I'm thinking of Klepnikov, I believe. Maybe he doesn't have it anymore. I'm thinking of the 100-back world record for men, but I don't know 100% sure if he has that record still. But I do remember at one point during the suspension that he did and didn't have the record, because he went the time outside of an IOC event. So there was no, I guess, doping control for that. But yeah. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about this EA Sports CFB 2027 controversy. So essentially what happened is, on the CFB 2027 video game, it's no longer going to include microtransactions in single player modes. So for those of you that either don't play video games or maybe don't play CFB 2025, but EA Sports is relatively known for their microtransactions. If you play like Star Wars Battlefront, for example, that's an EA Sports game. You can pay extra money to get certain characters or certain weapons, or it's very much a pay-to-play thing, and that is the same case. I mean, that is the case not only in the multiplayer modes, but in the single-player modes as well. If you want certain maps, sometimes you have to make purchases to get those maps. It's not necessarily like a campaign where you get enough XP points, or you complete the level a certain way that you're supposed to move on. There is a pay-to-play aspect with a lot of these EA Sports video games. The pivot comes after widespread fan backlash and campaigns to boycott the game, largely driven by popular online personalities whose content serves as a crucial promotional vehicle for modern games. So, essentially, what that little paragraph from The Athletic is saying is that the influencers that play the game, promote the game, and get other people to play the EA Sports game are angry because EA Sports is, making people perform microtransactions. And they're like, well, this is stupid. Why are we making microtransactions for this game mode when it used to be free before, but also because, especially for the people that, like the online personalities, they're the ones promoting the game and getting people to buy the game. So their argument is, well, why do we have to do these BS microtransactions? So again, microtransactions require players to pay for access to certain in-game features, are commonplace in many games that feature online multiplayer modes. So again, a lot of EA Sports games. They often involve character skins or power-ups that give paying players exclusive content. Fortnite is also kind of the same way. There is a little bit of a pay-to-play aspect with Fortnite. You can get a battle pass. You can get skins. You can buy V-Bucks to get certain skins or background screens, songs, whatever. A lot of games have microtransactions, and I mentioned Fortnite because that is not a EA Sports game. That is a Epic Games game. Those transactions, however, are typically limited to online play, whereas most single-player games allow players to access their core content once they purchase the game, which essentially means that the single-player modes are typically campaign modes or story modes, where you're going through and you're just following the story. There's not really a lot that you can do to pay or to make somebody pay to play for a story mode, but EA Sports found a way. In the case of CFB 2027, released on July 2nd for deluxe version buyers and on Thursday for general public, EA required players to pay for XP slider progression within the game's Dynasty and Road to Glory modes. And for those of you that don't play CFB or any of the CFB football games, Dynasty is where you build your team. It's a story mode. You can pick like Indiana or Kent State or USF, where you can build your team, pay players with NIL. You do interviews, like the whole shebang. It's like you're in your own personalized college football season on the year, based on the player statistics, kind of like in the NFL, like the Madden games. Like every player has a ranking and all that. There's also the Road to Glory mode. These modes are two of the franchise's most popular and are both single player modes. The base price for the game is $69.99, and it made the inclusion of microtransactions a point of further criticism, because again, you're paying $70 for this game, and it gets remade every single year. There's not a lot of changes that happen to it. Sometimes they add in or take away certain game modes. Obviously, there's going to be different players in each year, but it's very similar to NBA 2K, Madden, MLB The Show. Like, those are similar games, except those are all professional sports based. These are college sports based. But all of those games cost around $60 to $70 per buy. And they all have different game modes that require microtransactions. By requiring additional payments to progress in those single-player modes, EA broke from a model it had established across its sports games over the last 30 years, and online backlash was swift. Average players and prominent sports game influencers called the tactic a money grab and expressed outrage that EA hadn't announced their inclusion before the game launched. And that is kind of a sneaky thing for EA to do. The fact that, at least for this specific game for CFB, like the CFB 2027, if it wasn't in CFB 2026, but it's in CFB 2027, you would think there'd be some kind of announcement regarding that, or even when you download the game, if you're buying it digitally, or on the box, if you're buying it as a CD, you would think there'd be some kind of disclaimer saying, other in-game purchases, including the single-player mode, because a lot of the times there will be a note even for free games, like free games on your phone. There's little warnings that pop up where it'll say in-game purchases required for some aspects of the game. I think EA probably had that warning, but they did not announce it for the single-player modes, and that is what sparked the backlash. And one of the most popular CFB gamers, Bordox, said, "Sneaking microtransactions into single-player modes lets me know everything I need to know about where EA wants to take both football titles in the future. That's why it's now more than ever That's why it's now or never to make a change. Taking the game in that direction is going to ruin all of the support and love you have built from this community. Do what is right at EA Sports College. And there's a lot of comments that are in agreement with this tweet. And the streaming college football, like the CFB 2026, that was something that I've seen a lot of people do. Not just Bordox, but a lot of other people, including some of my friends. So in response, EA has decided to eliminate the paid progression systems at the center of the controversy. It said the changes will take effect Saturday morning. And it says, in college football 2027, we aspire to deliver the deepest experience to date with all new Dynasty blueprint, new positions in Road to Glory, and the best college football gameplay yet. And that was what the game publisher said in a statement. However, your feedback on Road to Glory and Dynasty is that we've missed the mark with the introduction of paid progression options. This was added independent of deeper mode progression with the aim to give players more choice, but what you've said is that they're not adding the value we intended. Which I guess, I don't necessarily think that's what Bordox was trying to say. I don't think that's what really anybody was trying to say. I think what most people were upset about was the fact that you're making people pay to play on single player game modes on a game where you've never done that before. That's where people are upset. And the game is already it's already expensive. It's already expensive. If your game is college football on EA Sports, the $70 is essentially a yearly subscription. You're paying $70 a year to play college football 27. And now you're adding in all these other microtransactions within the game, not only on multiplayer mode, not only where you have to play on online modes, but also the single player modes that you play on your own. That seems a bit unreasonable to me. Why even have it cost $70 in the first place if you're going to make people pay to play in progressions for the single player game modes? It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. It's completely outrageous, and that's why so many people are livid with the decision that EA made to have the microtransactions. Luckily, they got rid of it. It said it would take place on Saturday, so that's at least something. EA Sports College actually made a little statement on their Twitter. That statement says, "Thank you for your continued passion and for the incredible response to College Football 27. We love this game and the sport. College football is and always will be about the sights, sounds, pageantry, traditions, and atmosphere of Saturday. In College Football 2027, we aspired to deliver the deepest experience to date with all new Dynasty blueprint, new positions in Road to Glory, and best college football gameplay. However, your feedback on Road to Glory and Dynasty is that we've missed the mark with the introduction of paid progression options. This was added independent of deeper mode progressions." That's something I read earlier. It says, "Tomorrow morning, we will remove all paid progression options from Road to Glory and Online Dynasty. And an unfortunate side effect of removing paid progression is that players that have college point balances in their wallets will not be able to apply the balances in Road to Glory or Dynasty. So jump in between now and then to apply your points. Our goal for live service plans in CFB 2028 and beyond will be to deliver valuable features and content with greater transparency and communication. We're moving fast to respond to your feedback in-game, so we stay tuned for follow-up communications next week, where we'll take you through more design details and share our goals for CFB 2027. We love this game. We love this community. We love college football. CFB 27 is our third and best CFB ever, and we can't wait to see you on the field." So that was just the main thing that we need to look at here, because we already talked about the front part of the statement, and that was something that was referred to in the article. But just looking at the back end of the statement, where it points out oh, well, shucks, because of this situation, now people that have college point balances in their wallets will not be able to apply the balances to Road to Glory or Dynasty. Okay, like, based on their reaction on Twitter, I don't really think that that's relevant at all, considering the fact that most people seemingly use those points on multiplayer game modes. So why on earth would it be an issue for people to have points or point balances in their wallets when it's not like they can't it's not like they could only use them for Road to Glory or Dynasty. They would also be able to use them for other game modes that are multiplayer game modes in College Football 25 or in College Football 27. So I really don't understand why that was even included there, especially if they're like, I mean, I don't know, maybe if they're saying like you should apply the points now if you want to advance up the levels quicker. Still think that's kind of ridiculous. Also, the part where it says our goal for live service plans in CFP 2028 and beyond will be to deliver valuable features and content with greater transparency and communication. I think really driving home on the transparency and communication, that is something that absolutely needs to be done after what happened this past week with the game release. So I don't know how they're going to do that. I know companies like EA and other gaming companies like to be a little bit sneaky, to say the least, just because then, you get people to buy in and then you sneak in some microtransactions and all of a sudden, people are like, well, I already paid $70. What's 10 more? What's 20 more? What's 30 more? And then you get them in that way. So yeah, I think that's where people got really upset because, again, just completely disingenuous, not a lot of integrity there, but at least EA was able to make the correction. They made the right choice, and yeah, I guess that's pretty much it with that. But yeah, just absolutely crazy. But yeah, the CFB game by EA has a huge audience behind it. Ever since its return in 2024 with the CFB 2025 game, the CFB 2025 game became the all-time best-selling American sports game in US dollar sales. And that was at the 10-year anniversary of the release of the 2014 NCAA CFB 2014. That was the last release of the game for about 10 years, and then EA decided to release a CFB 2025 in 2024. So its popularity is at an all-time high. So that's the other thing for me when I'm looking at it is why on earth would you compromise the popularity of the game with you just trying to make a few extra bucks when the popularity of the game is already going to bring that in? Why compromise that? Because now, next year, if something like this happens again, less people are going to want to buy the game unless EA does another reversal again next year, and next year's game release, because there is going to be another release next year. That's, again, like I said before, that's the nature of how games like CFB and Madden and NBA 2K and MLB The Show work. It's a yearly release. Not a lot of changes in the game, minor changes to game modes, sometimes new game modes are introduced, etc. But that is generally how it works. So if EA does it again to compromise themselves, we might see a dip in popularity of not only CFB 27, but, or not just, I mean, not CFB 27, but not only the CFB game that EA has, but also the other games that they have as well, because of how EA has handled the CFB 2027 situation and possibly the 2028 situation. Because if people don't like the way they're handling one game that EA has, and they see that EA is the problem, then that means popularity is not just going to dip for that CFB game. It's going to dip for a lot of other EA games as well, and it's going to bring them more problems than it is going to bring them more dollars. So I implore EA to not make the same mistake next year when they release CFB 28. All right. Before we start talking about the World Cup and Erling Haaland's little souvenir that he brought home to Norway, I have a message from our sponsor.
This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schlyde at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com.
All right, so let's talk about the little souvenir that Erling Haaland brought home first. So Erling Haaland walks off the plane in Norway with a taxidermy raccoon holding an empty bottle of booze. And it looks like the bottle of booze that's there is some kind of whiskey bottle. It looks like a bottle of whiskey. But they identified the internet identified Wild Bill's Western Store in Dallas as the origin of Haaland's prize from the World Cup. Julie Newport, the store's co-owner, said, "We've sold very few just because they're about $750." And Erling Haaland made a little joke on his X account. He said, "It followed me home," with a raccoon emoji and a side laughing, crying emoji. And it's him walking off the plane with his bags on one shoulder and the taxidermy raccoon with the bottle of, I'm not sure if that's whiskey or Fireball. Well, I guess both are whiskey, but the raccoon with the bottle of whiskey under the other arm. It's just hilarious. And Newport said she got a call in June that someone from the Norwegian team would be stopping in. The store was near the hotel where the Nordic players were staying. When the players arrived on June 30th, she had her doors, said, "I had my team lock the doors and we basically gave them run of the store for an hour and a half. They drank bourbon and we taught them how to line dance." So now Erling Haaland knows how to line dance. So that could maybe be a celebration that we see him do when he plays, when he's on Man City. In addition to the taxidermy, which is called Whiskey Raccoon, but is technically holding G&J Greenall's Wildberry Gin, Haaland picked up 3 hats and a t-shirt that reads, "Y'all can kiss my Dallas." Newport said the rest of the group got hats, t-shirts, boots, belts, belt buckles, overcoats, and Western shirts. Unfortunately for those who'd like to pick up the same statue, Newport said they're sold out. And the artisan who made these taxidermy pieces just retired. She said, "We've got to find a vendor." So now she's basically scrambling to find a vendor for these taxidermy raccoons, because since Erling got one, now everybody wants one, because as this World Cup has gone on, the entire country has just absolutely fallen in love with Erling Haaland. So that's pretty much where we're at right now with that. But I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. Apparently there's alternatives to the taxidermy raccoon. There's also a squirrel on a stripper pole for $450, a squirrel smoking a cigarette, and holding an empty mini Jack Daniels for $500, and a squirrel sheriff posing with its gun drawn for $500. So I guess Erling didn't want anything to do with the squirrel. That's pretty much what I'm getting from this story, but I just thought it was kind of interesting that was what he chose, was the taxidermy raccoon. It's definitely honestly, kind of, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a very interesting choice, like, of souvenir to bring home to your home country. But, or like, just a souvenir from America. I just thought that was really interesting, and I thought you guys would probably find that really funny. Okay, so let's recap some of these quarterfinal matches. So France beat Morocco 2-0, and France, I mean, they've been playing really good this entire World Cup. So has Morocco, besides the game against France. But one of the stories that was surrounding this game with a little bit of controversy was the fact that every single referee in this match was Argentinian. They were all from Argentina. And going into this match, a lot of people were afraid that these Argentinian refs were going to rig the outcome of the France-Morocco game so that Argentina would not have to play France in the World Cup final, assuming that France gets past Spain today. Or I should say right now, because, again, that game is going on right now. But, yeah, that's pretty much what happened with the France-Morocco game. And, again, France has been on a pretty decent tear. I think the worst game that they probably played was against Paraguay, but that was a pretty rough game from both teams. Both teams were it was basically fist fighting, to be honest. Like, they were just at each other's throats. But besides that game, to me, again, was an outlier for France. France has been putting on a really great set of performances throughout this World Cup, including a 2-0 finish over Morocco. That was a really tough Morocco team to beat without the help of the Argentinian refs. There's also Spain versus Belgium. That one was a little bit interesting. Spain took an early lead, and then Belgium scored in about the 60th or 64th minute, somewhere in there, pretty early in the second half. And then Spain answered kind of towards the end. Spain has had a lot of very heroic closes to games, to say the least. Kind of like Argentina, but a little less so, at least a little less scary, in my opinion, for Spain. I haven't really been worried about Spain being eliminated necessarily. But yeah, Belgium gets eliminated. I'm sure we're all happy about it. Maybe. I guess it depends on how you look at it. Like, if you wanted Belgium to go on and win the whole thing, then, we'd be able to say, oh, well, our only loss in the we lost to the we lost to the world champs in the knockout rounds. I mean, that's something to not hang our heads on, especially after a 4-1 loss, which we already went into that last week. Not really trying to go into that again, but since we lost to them 4-1, it would have been great to see them go on and win the World Cup, just to make us feel a little bit better about ourselves, make the trip to the round of 16, or I should say loss in the round of 16, feel less like a failure than a gain. But here we are. But yeah, Norway lost to England. I think Norway was a team that a lot of people were rooting for, especially after the United States got eliminated. There was a little bit of controversy surrounding that game as well, because before Jude Bellingham's second goal, the goal kick from Norway hit something up. I think it was one of the wires from the Skycam, and that affected where the ball was going to go, and it allowed England to make a quick run back to Norway's goal and get a goal out of that. It ended up going into extra time, but the goal in extra time was scored, or the goal that England scored in extra time was fairly early. It was in the 93rd minute of the game. So, yeah, but Norway also had a huge, huge missed opportunity because where'd he go? Sorloth, he had the ball at one point towards the end of the game, or not towards the end of the game, but in the second half, he had the ball. He was driving down the field. Haaland was wide open. He was wide open. And apparently Sorloth did not see Haaland right there. And he stopped and hesitated. And he thought he had a shot. And next thing, he literally half a second later, there was two guys from England that were right there ready to block the shot. And he still tried to get it off anyway. And he ended up missing. And that was probably one of the best opportunities that Norway had the entire game, besides the goal from Schendelup. But, you know, that's just the name of the game sometimes. Sometimes, you know, you don't necessarily see. Sometimes the lights are too bright. And in this case, I think the lights were probably too bright. Norway making their first ever quarterfinal appearance in their entire history. Like, they have a lot to be proud of this World Cup, and I think it's only going to get better for them next year because I mean, they're not really losing a lot of people. If anything, they're going to be gaining some people. But yeah, I think as of right now, based on who's left in the World Cup, I think either England or Spain are people's favorites to win, or maybe France, just because of the Kylian Dictador memes, where Kylian Mbappe is dressed up as a dictator and they play this song called Kylian Dictador. And yeah, that's pretty much the only way I can really explain the memes for that. But there's been a lot of those floating around on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, just everywhere. The memes are everywhere. But yeah, and then you notice that I did not mention Argentina to get a repeat championship, and that's because a lot of people are upset with Argentina this World Cup. A lot of people feel that Argentina probably should have lost to Cape Verde in the first round. They arguably should have lost to Egypt in the round of 16, and then they go and play Switzerland, which probably was the least controversial of Argentina's matches in the knockout rounds, but people were still upset about it just because of the whole thing with all the refs in the France versus Morocco game being Argentinian, and also things coming out about the Argentinian Federation putting their money in American banks to do certain things with money that are not allowed, basically. So there's a lot of controversy and anger surrounding this Argentinian team. Not a lot of people really want to see them win right now. Something that I have been seeing a lot too is that or at least something that I've seen being said by English fans, is that the World Cup is coming home. And well, you guys are 2 games away from the World Cup indeed coming home to England. Will it come home to England? This is probably going to be their toughest test all tournament against Argentina. I mean, they haven't really been playing the best football, but you cannot deny the talent that they do have on that team. And after this outcome, there is bound to be some controversy surrounding the outcome if Argentina does end up winning. But yeah, Spain has another neighborly match in this knockout round of the World Cup. The first neighbor that they had to play was Portugal in the round of 16, and now they have to play France, their neighbor to the north, in the semifinals. And frankly, I think France does have the edge here. I think they have a much deeper roster overall, not even just on offense, but just overall. I think offensively, both teams are pretty even, but I think the key is going to be Spain's defense. Is Spain's defense going to be able to hold up against France and Mbappe's offense? Because right now, Mbappe is still up there on the leaderboard for the Dior. And there's actually, like, France has a lot of players that are up there. They're able to distribute the ball to anybody on offense, and any of them are able to score. France is that good this year. They are that good this year. Honestly, at this point, France is kind of my favorite to win the World Cup. I will say a really funny storyline for this World Cup would be if France played England in the World Cup and France won, and it was on American soil. You can kind of, it's basically the Revolutionary War if you kind of think about it. Because France did contribute a lot to America winning against the British in the Revolutionary War. And now we're one game away from seeing England and France play each other in the World Cup final on American soil. The story, I swear, sometimes the stories, they just write themselves. I don't know how that happens, but it just does. Like, I think that's the outcome that I kind of want to see now, is France go up against England in the World Cup final. I think that would be a really fun World Cup final. England at the beginning was a little bit of an underdog going into this tournament. There was some controversy with the manager of England not having certain English stars on the roster in place of others, but it's been kind of working out for England. I'm not going to lie. They have a really well-run system. Something that currently is not going in England's favor as of right now is the fact that every single World Cup has been, or every team that has won the World Cup has had their manager reside in the same country. So like when Germany won the World Cup back in, I think it was 2011, the manager of the German team was German. Every manager up until this point that has won the World Cup has done it with their home country. France, their manager is from France. England's manager is not from France. As of right now, out of the 4 teams in the field, England's manager is the only one that does not reside in his home country or is not from that home country. Like, that's not his nationality. He's just there to manage the football team. But, I mean, we can relate to that, right? I mean, our manager is not from the United States. Actually, I think he's from Argentina, ironically. Well, no, that's wrong. But he's not from America. Or not from the United States. That's the main point. But anyways, it's going to be a really interesting set of semifinal games and final game. The final game is going to be Sunday, July 19th at 2. We've got one semifinal match, which is England versus Argentina, tomorrow at 2. And of course, right now we have the France versus Spain matchup as I'm speaking to you guys right now. But yeah, I do like the way England has been playing. I feel like they've been getting better and better as the games go on with the World Cup. What they've been able to do in their knockout round. I mean, their path was not an easy path. Just looking back on it, so England had to play Congo, which, I mean, that was probably the easiest game that they had. Then they had to play Mexico in Mexico. That was an insanely tough game. They had not only had to play Mexico, but they had to play Mexico in the Azteca, which is a stadium that Mexico never loses in. I think this would have been the 13th game that Mexico has ever lost in the Azteca. Then they have to go up against Norway and Erling Haaland, and this is a Norway team that just took down Brazil. So a really tough Norway team. And now they have to go up against last World Cup's champions, Argentina. And Argentina, you can argue, probably has the easiest path, or has had the easiest path out of everybody in the knockout rounds. Just looking at Argentina's path, they go up against Cape Verde, barely escape. Then they go up against Egypt, barely escape. But I think these were two teams that Argentina really should not have had trouble with. Then they go up against Switzerland, who over the course of the knockout rounds at that point had scored only 2 goals. This is a Switzerland team that played Algeria and then struggled against Colombia. And like I said before, that was probably the best game that Argentina played out of the 3 that they had to play. And now they're going up against England. I think England, out of the 4 teams that Argentina is going to play in the knockout rounds, by far is the toughest team that they're going to play. Kind of like with Spain versus France. I think both these teams, pretty deep rosters. I think the key difference is going to be whether or not England's defense is going to be able to lock down Messi and the offense. I mean, I really do think that England and Spain are, at least in my mind, kind of the underdogs going in, just because, again, Argentina won the World Cup back in 2022. A lot of that roster is still on that team. And England has a pretty new and young roster. Not a lot of experience besides maybe Harry Kane going into the semifinals of the World Cup. And I guess for me, I'm a little bit concerned for England in terms of, are the lights too bright? Do they have enough experience to go and get past this Argentina team who, yeah, they might not have been playing well, but that's something that young teams will tend to overlook. They will overlook teams that are playing well. So I think it's really important for England to just stay the path and not stray away from what they've been doing throughout this entire World Cup. Which, again, really easy to do if you're not that experienced in the World Cup and you've been watching the way Argentina has been playing. I will say, when Argentina is in a desperate situation, we saw this with Egypt, we saw this with Cape Verde. If Argentina is in a desperate situation, they'll either have the help of the refs or they will be clutch enough to do what they need to do to get the win. And in both those games, both those things kind of happened, I guess. I mean, Argentina, they were they had to be clutch against Cape Verde because Cape Verde was being clutch against them. I mean, very late in the game, Argentina went up against Cape Verde. And then they had just this stupidly amazing goal. It might have been the best shot throughout the entire World Cup to tie it 2-2, to take it to extra time. I mean, it does not really get much better than that. I feel like Spain, ever since the first game that they played in the World Cup, I feel like, at least to me, I've been kind of underlooking Spain. I haven't really been like, oh, Spain, they're good, like, because of the way they played in their first game. But looking back, who was in Spain's group that they played and that they had a tough time against? Oh, that's right. It was Cape Verde that they had a tough time against. They drew against Cape Verde. So, and that was the only team in their group that they could not beat. So I don't know. Maybe, I think, again, because of that Cape Verde game and because a lot of people had impressions on Cape Verde because they're like, oh, it's a country of 500,000 people. Like Iowa has more than 500,000 people. Just saying stuff like that, just making Cape Verde seem like not really that great of competition. And yet they go and they draw Spain and they take Argentina to the wire in the knockout rounds. They draw everybody else in the group play. Like, that was not a bad team that Spain had to face early on. And now Spain has been going, and at least in the group, or not in the group, but in the knockouts, they beat Austria 3-0. That was their most dominant performance so far. Then they beat Portugal 1-0. They send Ronaldo to retirement, although I'm not 100% sure if he's going to retire. I feel like he'll probably come back for one more. Maybe, but we'll see. Then Spain goes up against Belgium, probably their toughest competition, and beats them 2-1. And again, like I said before, in a lot of those games, there is a lot of late game heroics by Spain. So when they go up against France, and France, they do like to establish themselves early. They do like to make their presence known early. That's what they did against Paraguay. That's what they did against, they did that against Morocco as well. They did it against Sweden. France likes to establish themselves early, let their competition know it's ours this year. We're winning the World Cup. You're not going to stand in our way, and that's that. At least that's kind of the vibe I get when I watch France play. Like, they're not here to mess around. France is here to win the world. France, this is going to be my prediction before we go off. I think France is going to win the World Cup. I don't think the game is going to go to PKs. I think at most it will go to extra time, but I do believe that France is going to win the World Cup this year out of these four teams. I'm the most confident in France out of the four teams. I feel like France has been more dominant. They're more able to score. They have depth, which I think they have more depth than any of the teams that are currently left, which would be France, Spain, England, and Argentina. But that is my prediction for who's going to win. I think France is going to win. I think England will sneak by Argentina tomorrow. I think they will sneak up on them. And I don't think that Argentina is going to be able to do enough in the end to secure the victory. I think it will be France versus England. I know I was kind of joking about that storyline earlier, but I do think it will. I do think that's what's going to end up happening, is that France is going to play England in the final, and I think France is going to win. And I also think that we are all going to laugh together about the irony of France beating England on American soil on America's 250th, or on the year of America's 250th. So, yeah, here we are. But, yeah, that's all that I've got time for today. Next week, we're getting ever closer to college football. I think we might start looking into some of the stories leading up into that. Training camp for NFL is also going on. Might also talk about that. We're obviously going to recap the World Cup, the semifinal games, and the championship game. Give an overall reaction on that, and any other relevant stories that pop up, kind of like the controversial story with the IOC and the EA CFB 27 games. We'll be talking about stories like that next week as well. If you were not able to jump onto the broadcast right at 2, you can go and listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Millions.co, YouTube, Patreon, as well as other podcasting platforms. And I have been starting to post more on my socials, so Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. can search up Schlyde into Sports. You'll be able to find everything there. With that being said, I'll see you guys all next week. Schlyde out.